Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down my top 32 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my top 32 wide receiver rankings and tiers for the 2023 fantasy football season. Now, we've already done a video on my top 12 as well as my top 24 wide receivers. So if you want a more in-depth look into those wide receivers, watch both of those. In today's video, we'll be mainly talking about wide receivers 25 through 32. We will kind of gloss over wide receivers 1 through 24. So tier number 1, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp. You can make the argument that Tyreek Hill should be the wide receiver 1, that Chase or Cooper Kupp should be the number 1 wide receiver, and I'm not going to debate with you. These guys are the clear top heads of the table at their position. I love Jefferson, Chase, Hill, and Kupp this season. Unless there's an injury, I would be shocked if any of these guys fell outside the top 5 at the wide receiver position. Moving to tier number 2 of Stephon Diggs and Davante Adams. Now, I obviously am extremely confident in these two wide receivers as well, but they're definitely step downs in my opinion compared to the first 4. Stephon Diggs obviously linked to one of the best quarterbacks, one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL. Davante Adams basically the exact opposite. Jimmy Garoppolo is not the greatest quarterback on earth, but when you're as good as Davante Adams, I could be throwing you the ball and you have that upside to be a top 5 wide receiver. Tier number 3 is composed of 7 players: CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, as well as Amon-Ra St. Brown. Personally, I do have Amon-Ra St. Brown ranked ahead of CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown, but it is not by much because they are all in the same tier. Definitely see most people have Lamb and Brown ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Ultimately, the difference between them for me is that I really feel like this Lions offense is going to take that next step up this year. And for the beginning of the season, they're not going to have Jameson Williams. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, the first 6 games of the season, might drop a 30-burger multiple times, and that gives him the slight edge over the other two. But again, I don't dislike Lamb or AJ Brown. Moving to tier number 4, we have 3 guys that are perceived as the number 2 on their team, and 1 guy that is the clear number 1. We have Jalen Waddle at number 10, number 11, Garrett Wilson, number 12, Devontae Smith, and number 13, my guy, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Waddle, Smith, and Higgins are the 1B on their team. Now, I won't call them the number 2 because in most offenses, they would be the number 1, and it's not like the Dolphins only throw to Jalen Waddle 4 times a game because he's the number 2 guy, right? Same thing with Devontae Smith or T. Higgins. I love Jalen Waddle this season. I am in on Garrett Wilson. My only worry about him is the fact that I think the Jets might struggle a little bit more than people think. But even if they struggle, Garrett Wilson dominated with these garbage quarterbacks all of last year. Devontae Smith and T. Higgins, in my opinion, all very safe wide receivers. I think these guys are all very safe. The risk comes in at wide receiver when we get further down in the rankings, which starts here in tier number 5 with wide receiver number 14, Chris Olave. I am a big fan of the skill set of Chris Olave, but I worry about the fact that if Michael Thomas is able to stay healthy, I know this is a big butt like Kim Kardashian, then maybe Chris Olave ends up being a big fat bust because Michael Thomas dominates 50 Shades of Grey style. So again, I don't dislike the player Chris Olave. I just worry that his role in this offense might be a little bit pumped up by the fact that Michael Thomas was injured basically all of last season. And we even saw it last year when Michael Thomas was healthy. He's still that same Michael Thomas we remember from the past. Moving to tier number 6, we have Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns, DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks, Calvin Ridley of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. In terms of safety, I feel as though Amari Cooper is the safest player in this tier. Amari Cooper, the second year with Deshaun Watson obviously was complete and utter dog shit when he came into the games last season. Ultimately, though, I think with a full offseason with him getting the nod in week number 1, with all the money they paid him, Deshaun Watson might return to be that top 4, top 5, top 3 quarterback in the NFL? And if that is the case, Amari Cooper has legitimate league-winning upside. DK Metcalf, I love the player. Obviously, the guy looks like he's molded like a Greek god. Ultimately, my biggest worry for Metcalf is the fact that they bring in JSN in the NFL draft. They also have Tyler Lockett, so there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Calvin Ridley, another one of those guys that is coming off of missing a bunch of times. Is he going to be risky? Is he going to be kind of bad like Deshaun Watson last year? Or is he going to be the risky good where, sure, you have to pay the high price, but he ends up being an absolute smash because of how good of a player he is? And then Debo, just an awful year last season. Moving now to tier number 7, we have Christian Watson, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and Michael Pittman Jr. I'm a huge fan of all of these wide receivers, though I do feel like the upside of a guy like Amari Cooper, Metcalf, Ridley, or Debo Samuel, if they hit, they really have that crazy upside, which I'm not too sure that in their given situations right now, any of these guys have. Christian Watson, obviously moving from Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, that's not the best. DJ Moore gets an upgrade at quarterback, but Justin Fields isn't the most prolific passer in the National Football League. Terry McLaurin goes from bad quarterbacks to probably bad quarterbacks again with Sam Howell, and then Michael Pittman gets a step up at quarterback, but anything would have been better than the corpse of Matt Ryan last season. Now moving to tier number 8, where the true breakdown begins. We got Mike Williams at 23 and Drizzy Drake London at 24. The true breakdown begins here with DeAndre Hopkins, free agent right now, current underdog ADP, wide receiver 19 at pick 37.7. He was the wide receiver 47.5 PPR last year, but the wide receiver 11.5 PPR points per game. Now, I know based upon ADP, I am off on DeAndre Hopkins, but I would not consider him to be a full fade. I just didn't want to put him in the top 24, not knowing what team he was going to be on. Now, there were definitely some people that thought maybe he would stay as an Arizona Cardinal, and I also thought that was kind of possible. But now that he's gone, it really does depend which team he lands on to how high I want to rank him, because I know DeAndre Hopkins, in terms of skill, is the best guy we are going to talk in depth about this video. Now, I love Mike Evans, I love Keenan Allen, I love Chris Godwin, but I think in terms of skill set, DeAndre Hopkins is just a notch above those guys, and that's not to shit on them, because those are also really good wide receivers, but DeAndre Hopkins, when healthy, even in the older age, could be a league winner. The problem lies with what team is he going to go to? Is he going to go to the Chiefs and be the number 1 receiver and potentially break fantasy football because Patrick Mahomes feeds him and Kelsey the rock? Or is he going to go to the Cowboys where it's CeeDee Lamb, DeAndre Hopkins, and Michael Gallup? Now, it's not like DeAndre Hopkins will be a bust in that scenario, but I'm not going to be overwhelmingly excited about D-Hop in that scenario, right? Still draft him because I like Dak, I like the team, but he doesn't have that crazy upside to me. If he goes to the Bills, he'll be competing with Stephon Diggs, and while that's great for the Bills, they add another weapon that is miles ahead of Gabe Davis. For fantasy, that's not the landing spot where he finishes as the number 1 receiver in fantasy football. So there's a lot to think about with D-Hop. 96 targets last year, 10.7 per game, 35th, 64 receptions, 7.1 per game, 34th, 717 receiving yards, 79.7 per game, 41st, and 3 total touchdowns. 50th in terms of interesting efficiency stats. Some people will be like, oh man, DeAndre Hopkins is getting a little bit old. Well, this man dominated last year. 51.8% route win rate, 4th, 47% win rate versus man, 2nd, and a 34.1% dominator rating, ranking 6th. Obviously, it all depends on the landing spot, but right now, I can't bump DeAndre Hopkins much lower because even if he's in a situation like Dallas, where he's the wide receiver 2 behind CeeDee Lamb in terms of targets, in my opinion, I think that's kind of how things would lay out. I'd have to move CeeDee Lamb down, but I also wouldn't want DeAndre Hopkins ranked as like wide receiver 32 or lower than 25. He might even move up slightly. I think this ranking right now is fair because we don't know where he's necessarily going to be playing. Wide receiver 26, we got Keenan Allen of the LA Chargers, underdog ADP, wide receiver 21 at pick 41.2. Last year, it was the wide receiver 41.5 PPR and the wide receiver 12.5 PPR points per game. Playing in 10 games last season, he had 89 targets, 8.9 per game, 47th, 66 receptions, 6.6 per game, 33rd, 752 receiving yards, 75.2 per game, 39th, and 4 total touchdowns, 37th. He he is still an elite route runner at the NFL level, even though he's getting up there in age. 2.18 target separation, 8th at wide receiver. My biggest worry about Keenan Allen is kind of like what I talked about with DK Metcalf. He obviously has that competition of Mike Williams. They just draft Quentin Johnston in the NFL draft in the first round. They also have Austin Eckler, who is a target vacuum. That man eats up targets like Ezekiel Elliott eats fucking turkey on Thanksgiving. That fat bastard probably eats that shit in a rapid form, just like Eckler eats up the targets, right? Eckler is a big target on this team. He could get 100 plus targets. There's a lot of targets on this team. Quentin Johnston could be a huge target. They drafted him in the first round, and obviously Keenan Allen is getting older, and Keenan Allen also isn't necessarily the most non-injury prone guy. Now, I'm not going to slap the injury prone moniker on Keenan Allen because I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but what I will say is that I am a little bit worried about Keenan Allen's health, especially as he gets older. I get worried about all the older guys' health because I know the medicine's better and all, but you're not the same guy you were at 23 years old with how old Keenan Allen is. Ultimately, he's still linked to an amazing quarterback in Justin Herbert the pervert. He's still on an amazing offense that wants to throw the ball at an incredibly high rate. So Keenan Allen should be just fine. I have him ranked 5 spots lower. He's my wide receiver 26. He's underdog's wide receiver 21. And I think based upon looking at things in a fair way, that makes sense. If you want to jump all over me and say Keenan Allen should be ranked higher, I can understand it, but he's in the same tier as a bunch of other wide receivers that I view in a very high light. At number 27, tier number 8 continues with Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, underdog ADP wide receiver number 29 at pick number 57. Before we keep on going into today's video more in depth with all these other wide receivers, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. If you are brand new to Underdog Fantasy and click on the link in the video description, you'll get a $100 first match deposit bonus. If you deposit $100, they'll give you an additional $100. Underdog holds the biggest best ball contest ever for fantasy football. What best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that is it. There's no waivers. There's no in-season management. There is no trades. You draft your 18-round team, and that's it. Underdog will automatically put your highest scores into your lineup at the end of every single week. The biggest fantasy football contest ever, $25 to enter, 150 max entries, $3 million in first place, $15 million in total prizes. If that sounds like a little too expensive for you, that's okay, because they also have cheaper contests like the Puppy number 2, just $5 to enter, and $1 million in total prizes. So make sure you guys check that out. I draft on there all the time, and I'm going to start firing up some live streams as we get into the offseason even longer, and we're going to be talking about doing drafts on there. So make sure you guys check it out. Link in the video description, or promo code Notorious for a $100 first match deposit bonus up to $100. So you deposit 100, they give you an additional 100. If you deposit 50, they give you an additional 50, 25, 25. I hope you get what I'm putting down here. If you have any questions, leave them down below. So back on into things. Chris Godwin, wide receiver 20 last year in half PPR and 20 in points per game, tied with Jerry Jeudy. Doing so with a version of Tom Brady that was deflated like the footballs Tom Brady took into Indianapolis for that playoff game all those years ago. Right? Anyone, even the Tom Brady gawkers, right? The people that will get on their knees for Tom Brady will admit that that was a bad year. No bueno. 15 games played in 2022, 142 targets, 9.5 per game, number 10. 104 receptions, 6.9 per game, number 6. 1,023 receiving yards, 68.2 per game, 20th. 3 total touchdowns, 50th. Now, I am higher than consensus on both Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. Now, I get it. There's going to be an argument. Nick, Tom Brady was bad? Well, you want to know what's going to be really bad? When fucking Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask are the quarterbacks for the team, right? And I can agree with that. Things might get worse. But as long as the quarterback has a pulse, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are really good. So it doesn't take Tom Brady in his prime or Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, these great quarterbacks to throw the rock to Chris Godwin. 256 total route wins last year, 5th. 45.8% route win rate, 20th. 42.1% win rate versus man, 15th. And 55.6% contested catch rate, 14th. Now, I get why the underdog ADP is low on Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, or high, you might say, right? Wide receiver 29 for a guy that finished top 20 last year. Reason why is because of the quarterback, and people are very nervous about that. But what I take from his price right now is that they are fully baking in the fact that Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask are complete and utter dog shit. So you're getting him at a discount, and it's not like he was injured. It's not like he tore his ACL at the end of last season, right? Him or Mike Evans. That didn't happen. And they're coming at this discount because of the quarterback play. So even though the Buccaneers are about as exciting as watching paint dry this season, I still think Chris Godwin and Mike Evans can light it up for fantasy. Mike Evans to close out tier number 8 of the Bucs. Underdog ADP, wide receiver 31 at pick 66.9. Wide receiver 16.5 PPR, 14.5 PPR points per game. Playing in 15 games last season, 128 targets, 8.5 per game, number 17. 77 receptions, 5.1 per game, number 21. Can you do something for me? 1,124 receiving yards, 74.9 per game, ranking 12th, and 6 total touchdowns, 20th, 6.9 target accuracy, 79th. So again, to kind of reiterate, Tom Brady was not good at all last season. 8.8 yards per target, 26th, 14.9 yards per reception, 19th. Mike Evans, when you Google 1,000-yard wide receiver, a picture of Mike Evans will show up, right? This guy, year in and year out. He did it with Jameis Winston. He's done it in college with Johnny Football. He's done it with Tom Brady. This is a guy that prints 1,000-yard seasons. He just does. Doesn't matter if you're out there playing quarterback for the team. So again, I understand the risk. I understand why some people might be a little bit squeamish, a little bit scared to draft Mike Evans. But ultimately, the skill is just so high that I can't seemingly place him outside the top 32. I was shocked to read that his ADP was outside of the top 32 this season. And I think that I'm not the only one who is kind of looking at this situation and being like, I get it. Bucks might not be the best, but these guys are really good. And I think people are going to start to wisen up, as they say, on Mr. Mike Evans. Moving now to tier number 9, composed of 4 players. Jerry Jeudy of the Denver Broncos, wide receiver 29. Currently coming off the board is the wide receiver 22 at pick 41.8. Wide receiver 21.5 PPR last year, 20.5 PPR points per game, tied with Godwin. Obviously, the Denver Broncos crashed and burned last season. They were the ultimate hype train. They were a team people were talking about, the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson. Let's ride. Broncos country, let's ride. They are going to derail the Kansas City Chiefs. They are going to Cleveland steamer the LA Chargers, and they are going to butt fuck the Las Vegas Raiders, and they're going to somehow win the Super Bowl. Things seem all bright and shiny. Week 1, Russ looks good. The team looks good. Sure, they lose to Geno Smith, and Geno Smith doesn't write back, but ultimately, that wasn't a bad game out of Seattle. Sure, they lost, but things didn't look that bad. But then, as the weeks kept going on, things got worse and worse. Russell Wilson's antics were getting even funnier. The team got absolutely dismantled multiple games, and Russell Wilson is still hitting us with the let's ride. It was very funny, but Russell Wilson was terrible. This offense was putrid to watch. It was like the first time you watched 2 girls, 1 cup. That was your reaction to watching a Denver Broncos game last season. 15 games played for Jerry Jeudy, 100 targets, 6.7 per game, 30 seconds, 67 receptions, 4.5 per game, number 30, 972 receiving yards, 64.8 per game, number 22. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. 6 total touchdowns, 20th, 31.1% dominator rating, 11th, 110.1 quarterback rating when targeted, 13th. So even though Russell Wilson sucked, when he threw it to Jerry Jeudy, things were looking good. 0.48 fantasy points per outrun, 19th, and 2.04 fantasy points per target, 13th. Obviously, they bring in Sean Payton, and they kick that bum Nathaniel Hackett to the curb. The question is Russ off his rocker? Is that the last we saw of Russ in Seattle? That was the good Russ, right? And now we've seen evil Russ, like fucking Anakin to Darth Vader. But Darth Vader's more powerful. This version of Russell Wilson is less powerful. It's like the reverse of Anakin and Darth Vader. But you get what I mean here. Is he off the rocker, or is he going to return with Sean Payton back to his former glory? Now, I am someone who has always been a Cortland Sutton truther. Now, he's not ranked in my top 32. But I think this Denver team is more competition than we think, and I think they're going to try to run the ball a bunch with Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine, that tag team running back core. So I like the talent of Jerry Jeudy. I've always loved Jerry Jeudy's talent. Out of college, you flip the tape on and your eyes ejaculate. You turn his tape on from Alabama and everything is beautiful, like they're sorority girls, all right? It's amazing. But then you look at the NFL and the tape isn't there. Sure, he's had some decent games, but he has yet to be consistent. Now, I get the quarterback play in Denver hasn't been the best his whole career. The coaching hasn't been great his whole career. So I'm not saying this guy is a bust. But what I'm saying is there's also negatives about Jerry Jeudy. There's also negatives about the team. Maybe Sean Payton can't fix this flaming pile of dog shit. So while I'm low on Jeudy, I don't necessarily think my ranking on Jeudy is that irrational, if I'm being honest with you. But hey, it's still June. Maybe I'm convinced by August that Russell Wilson has risen again. And maybe I'm all in on Jerry Jeudy come August. That's why it's a long summer until late August, early September when you're actually doing your fantasy drafts. Like button, subscribe button if you've enjoyed thus far. I really do appreciate it. Number 30, we got a guy that is screaming up the average draft position, screaming up the boards on Underdog Fantasy. Hollywood Brown of the Arizona Cardinals, underdog ADP wide receiver 33 at pick 65.1. Now, I have been someone that has been very negative towards this Arizona Cardinals team for good reason. They get rid of DeAndre Hopkins, but now this opens the door like your Elsa, and it opens the door for a humongous season out of Hollywood Brown. Now, I've been someone that is a big proponent of someone who believes I'm a big proponent of Kyler maybe missing the whole season. I'm a little worried about little Kyler being gone all year. But at the same time, I understand that if Kyler comes back, Hollywood Brown, his upside is legitimately super high because Kyler is really good in my opinion. Now, could the team be 0-6 by week 6? Kyler's supposed to come back and we never see Kyler? 100%. That's been my argument this whole time. But I also get the argument that maybe Kyler's ahead of schedule, which we're kind of learning about. He's going to go in week 3 and they just throw him out there. Feed him to the dogs. And then Hollywood Brown ends up having an amazing season. So while I don't love their backup plan at quarterback, if Kyler steps in there, you just got a huge steal in your fantasy draft. 12 games played in 2022, 107 targets, 8.9 per game. Number 28, he was the wide receiver, 46.5 PPR last year, and 31 in points per game, tied with me, Cole Hardman. And top 15 receiver in my rankings, Garrett Wilson. 67 receptions, 5.6 per game, 30th. 709 receiving yards, 59.1 per game, 43rd. And 3 total tugs, 50th at wide receiver. He was dominant in this offense, even with DeAndre Hopkins, 27.9% dominator rating, 19th. And Kyler obviously got banged up last year, 6.8% target, or 6.8 target accuracy from the quarterback, thrown to Hollywood Brown, 87th. I loved Hollywood Brown in Baltimore in terms of skill set. I like him in Arizona. Think he's a talented player. I think he's a speedster. I think he has that weak winning upside, right? Because he's so fucking fast, catches 3 balls. And obviously, you want him to catch like fucking 7 balls in the game, but he catch 3 balls and have 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's that much of a speedster. He's a burner, Lightning McQueen speed. I love Hollywood Brown. I'm worried about Kyler, but I don't want to eat crow and look like a fucking idiot when Kyler comes back in week 2. Looks pretty good, and Hollywood Brown ends up smashing in fantasy, and I have him ranked as like wide receiver 40. So wide receiver 30 seems pretty fair to me. Number 31, we got Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt of the Seattle Seahawks, underdog ADP, wide receiver 32 at pick 64. Wide receiver 13.5 PPR, 15.5 PPR points per game, tied with Devontae Smith and Amari Cooper. We talked about it with DK Metcalf. This team adds Jackson Smith-Njigba out of The Ohio State University. Now, I've been a big fan of JSN. It seems like everyone and their mother thinks JSN is the numero uno, the number 1 wide receiver in this NFL draft class. Geno Smith was cooking like Russell Wilson. Imagine that he could cook, right? This man was cooking up a 5-star fucking Michelin meal, Gordon Ramsay style in Seattle. Meanwhile, this bastard Russell Wilson couldn't even cook the food without burning it, right? It was a disaster in Denver, amazing in Seattle, and Geno looked great. I am a big proponent, again, of thinking Geno, that might have been the best we've ever seen, and this guy's gonna fall off the edge of the fucking earth like Christopher Columbus believed would happen. But at the end of the day, I also acknowledge that maybe Pete Carroll has just fucking figured it out. He's massaged out the kinks, and Gino's ready to roll. But now it's DK, Lockett, Kenneth Walker, JSN, Zach Charbonnet, Noah Fant. There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, baby. Does Lockett have that weekly big upside? Yes. But he's going to be as inconsistent as it gets. Now, if something was to happen to Metcalf or JSN, knock on wood, or maybe they ease JSN in just the tip, and maybe they don't go full out with JSN, and Lockett's still the number 2 target on the team, or maybe even number 1 ahead of Metcalf, and he has an amazing season. I could see that happening. And he has that crazy week-winning upside. In your fantasy championship, this dude could hang 30 fantasy points, right? You could see that happening. You could also see him getting 2. But he was a lot more consistent last year with DK, which was shocking because Gino really spread the ball out, whereas Russell Wilson just has laser eye vision on. If you guys remember, in Seattle with Lockett and Metcalf, Russ would just Lockett has the great game, and DK Metcalf sitting in the corner like a cuck doing nothing. Or Metcalf has the great game and Lockett does nothing. Last year, they could both, it was a symbiotic relationship. They both played well at the same time. 16 games played in 2022, 117 targets, 7.3 per game, number 22, 84 receptions, 5.3 per game, number 14, 1,033 receiving yards, 64.6 per game, 19, 9 total targets, 4th, 9 total touchdowns, I apologize, 4th. I think those touchdowns are probably going to go down this year. And that's going to sink Lockett's value. Now, touchdowns are hard to predict, but I'm just saying when you score fucking 9 touchdowns, if he scored 4 next season, that would obviously hurt him a lot and wouldn't really be surprising. Some interesting efficiency stats, 28.2% dominator rating, 18th. Congratulations to Lockett. 2.25 target separation, 5th. 51.3% route win rate, 5th. 46.3% win rate versus man, 5th. Lockett's good. There's no disputing that. It's just the situation. Number 32, we got Christian Kirk, wide receiver, 27 on our dog, pick 48.8. I don't get that, if I'm being honest with you. I just don't. Christian Kirk's a great player, but if Calvin Ridley's that guy, Himothy, right? If he's that guy, that dude, is Christian Kirk going to be able to finish as highly as last year? Probably not, right? He was amazing last year. I didn't like Christian Kirk, and he smashed. He smashed in a huge way. Wide receiver 11.5 PPR, 18 in points per game. Man played all season, all 17 games. 133 targets, 7.8 per game, 15th. 84 receptions, 4.9 per game, 14th. 1,108 receiving yards, 65.2 per game, 13th. And 8 total touchdowns, 11th. 29.4% dominator rating, 15th. 8 drops, 7th. 43.7% route win rate, 28th. Now, this is another offense that has a great quarterback and is loaded to the gills with weapons. Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby at running back. Tight end, Evan Ingram, who magically remembered how to catch the football. And they have Kirk, they've got Zay Jones, and they've got Calvin Ridley. If Calvin Ridley is the Calvin Ridley from the past, and if Zay Jones has a decent year, Ingram has a decent year, and these running backs are catching passes, what's going to happen to Christian Kirk? Sure, again, another guy with that crazy ceiling in any given game. The guy could go off and drop a fucking missile. Cuban Missile Crisis onto your opponent, right? Just deuce on the chest. But he also has the fact that, hey, the Jaguars got a lot of guys. What happens if Christian Kirk kind of just falls out of favor? So again, I still like all these guys, but the further you get down the tiers, the more things start to get a little bit scary. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below as well as hitting that like button. Make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, link down below in the video description, promo code Notorious, or click on the link in the video description for a $100 first match deposit bonus. So you deposit 100, you get additional 150, get additional 50, 25, get additional 25 again. I love drafting on Underdog. The only websites that I actually talk about on these videos are ones that I actually use. So make sure you guys check that out. Love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.